Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week. Remember when it looked like cannabis rescheduling would be imminent? Well, now there's a congressional movement led by the GOP to block and shut down that effort. With Terrence Cole expected to be approved this week as the new director of the DEA, the self-proclaimed prohibitionist takes over an agency that could stop any federal reform efforts from the past or the future as the industry prepares for the worst. Plus, to make this federal situation even more confusing, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, in official documents, recognizes that cannabis has medicinal therapeutic uses, even though it's still listed as the most restricted category of the CSA with drugs that have no medicinal value. And in Missouri, a milestone is reached when that state expunges another 150,000 past nonviolent cannabis charges. And we remember one of the most respected advocates and beloved personalities in that state, Daniel Jones, also known as Waxy Brown.
I just want to give a great big shout out to Pro Cannabis Media, to Brandon Jones.
All that and state by state cannabis reports and our international roundup on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's weekly record of the fight to end cannabis prohibition in our time. I'm Alaina Pinto. First up this week, the prohibitionists in Congress are moving towards blocking any cannabis rescheduling by the DEA or the DOJ. This week, Terrence Cole is expected to be approved as the head of the DEA, where the rescheduling movement ground to a halt when the new administration came into power. Now, as part of the federal spending bill and the 2026 budget, the GOP is trying to fight the Rohrabacher-Farr amendment that has annually been passed, keeping the Department of Justice away from state medical legal cannabis licensees. Since 2014, that amendment has been renewed annually as part of the budget process. But now, with the Republicans in charge of both houses on Congress, they feel empowered to change any gains made by the previous administration. It's interesting to note that this amendment only applies to state legal medical cannabis businesses. The move would block the DOJ from using any funds to move forward with rescheduling. It would also open the door for the feds to interfere with the already existing medical programs now approved in 40 states. Amazingly, this development comes in the same week that the U.S. Department of Agriculture referred to cannabis in its database as a therapeutic medicinal plant. That reference completely conflicts with its status as a Schedule I controlled substance with no medical value. Andrew Behringer attempts to sort this whole mess out.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Last week, Senate Republicans signaled they will be moving forward with the nomination of Terrence Cole to lead the DEA, which is a key position in ongoing drug enforcement efforts. A major focus for Cole is the rescheduling of cannabis, which has been on hold since January. During a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in April, Cole was asked whether the DEA would follow the Department of Health and Homeland Services recommendation to reclassify cannabis from a Schedule I to a Schedule III. Now, when pressed, Cole avoided a direct answer, stating he would give the matter careful consideration if confirmed. Now, most analysts believe that Cole will ultimately follow the White House's guidance on cannabis policy. This nomination indicates continued federal oversight and ongoing debates over cannabis and its rescheduling. In another development, Congress recently approved President Trump's recent budget bill, but quietly removed a crucial safeguard for the medical cannabis industry. The Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment, enacted in 2014, has historically prevented the Department of Justice from using medical federal funds to interfere with state legal medical cannabis programs. Now, this amendment has been essential in protecting patients, businesses, and caregivers operating legally under state laws, despite cannabis remaining federally illegally. However, recent amendments to the spending bill eliminated these protections entirely. Cannabis advocate and political consultants warn that this provides vulnerability to federal prosecution, asset forfeiture, and banking restrictions. The removal threatens nearly 500,000 jobs and could severely restrict patient access to medical cannabis. Many others explain that this is strictly just a political move. Even if protections are later reinstated, new restrictions could be added, especially near sensitive areas like schools or playgrounds. Industry stakeholders warn that this could push many operations underground, allowing the federal government to regain near unfettered authority over most of the industry and risking a full collapse of the legal medical cannabis market in the U.S. Well, that's the Washington D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Also this week, a group of 45 cannabis advocacy and medical groups, including Americans for Safe Access, U.S. Pain Foundation, National Multiple Sclerosis Society, and the Epilepsy Foundation of America, all are calling on congressional lawmakers to protect the state medical cannabis programs and not allow those protections to be removed from the budget and spending bills that are currently being discussed in committees. One of the oldest and most active lobby groups in Washington, D.C. is the National Cannabis Industry Association. As part of their weekly Voice of Cannabis podcast with executive producer Jimmy Young, both Aaron Smith and the NCIA's Director of Government Relations, Michelle Ritter Friberg, gave an update on the current rescheduling efforts and the movement to stop them.
NCIA will be asking the administration to, get this back on track in an expeditious way. And I think it's a real opportunity for the industry to see some progress, because rescheduling, remember, doesn't require congressional action. This can happen at the administrative level, which just provides a lot more latitude and ability to move quickly. And there are some threats in Congress to try to undermine that process.
We are very concerned by a provision that was included in this year's Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee bill that essentially says that the Department of Justice cannot use any of its federally appropriated funds to implement rescheduling. So let me break that down for people. What it means is that if this provision was to become law, which again, it has not become law yet, it still has a long way to go, that the Department of Justice cannot use any money to reschedule marijuana. So even, and again, this is all looking down a very long chain of events that has not happened yet, deep into the crystal ball. But, that does mean that we could be living in a world in which, potentially the rescheduling process gets moving again, whether that is through the administration, the new administrator, or through Congress. But if this appropriations language is passed and placed into law, it means that all of that could be potentially moot.
That episode of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast will be released this week. Next up, the state of Michigan, still one of the most active cannabis legal markets, but now a recent report names Michigan leading a category that they probably won't be promoting anytime soon. According to Cannabis Media in Connecticut, Michigan's legal weed market leads the nation in violations, even more than California. In 2024, cannabis regulators issued just under 2,500 violations, with 928 notices by Michigan licensees. Then 458 violations for California, followed by Washington and Missouri. The total number of fines collected for those violations is $10.8 million. There are also reports of crime rings run by the Chinese who have infiltrated the Michigan market and many other states. Amie Carter is our Michigan correspondent and is very active in state policy, and this week was back at her state house in Lansing fighting against a bill that is being debated regarding drivers operating under the influence of cannabis, even if they are not deemed impaired. Here's Amie.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weed Surge, reporting from the Capitol for this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Let's dive in. Today, a coalition of Michigan's leading cannabis advocacy gathered to oppose House Bill 4391. This proposed legislation seeks to authorize roadside saliva testing for cannabis, raising concerns about its scientific reliability and constitutional implications. The coalition warns that these saliva tests don't measure impairment but merely detect presence, potentially leading to wrongful arrests of responsible cannabis users. Michigan should not follow the path that only 2 states that allow such testing. In addition, they're voicing strong opposition to the governor's proposed wholesale cannabis tax, which critics argue could destabilize the market and hurt small businesses. Stay tuned as we advocate for thoughtful rights, respecting public safety policies here at the Binsfield office building. Together, we can defend Michigan's cannabis laws and support reform that truly serves the community. In other news, a mentor at Wayne County's Juvenile Detention Center is facing charges after allegedly providing cannabis-infused gummies to 4 17-year-old residents. Staff initiated an investigation upon noticing the youth's appearance lethargic, incoherent, and visibly impaired. A significant chapter is closing as Arbor Wellness in Ann Arbor is set to shut its doors this month. The dispensary was known for making what is to be believed as Michigan's first ever legal recreational sale in 2019, when it sold a few pre-rolled joints to the late icon John Sinclair. In Pinckney, C3 Industries is seeking to establish a new dispensary in a former fire station and is collaborating with village officials to secure the town's sole cannabis license. Additionally, cannabis prices continue to decline across Michigan, leading to decreased tax revenue. Local governments may soon start feeling financial pressure, and industry leaders caution that small growers may not endure the challenges of the state's oversaturated cannabis market without necessary reforms. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
One of the biggest stories in the cannabis world last week was the Immigration and Customs Enforcement raid on a pair of California farms that led to over 300 arrests and 1 accidental death. Jackie Bryant is a veteran journalist and advocate in her state, and this week she talked with our executive producer, Jimmy Young, about some of the issues going on in California.
Thanks, Alaina. I am so excited to welcome Jackie Bryant back into the WPCM TV / Pro Cannabis Media family. Jackie is from California, a very respected freelance journalist who once wrote an article that I loved reading, and we have become friends ever since. And I think you remember what it was all about, Jackie. Lobsters getting high. I couldn't believe it. I read it. I love you for it. And I so appreciate you taking the time away from your new child to join us here a little bit and give us some insight on California.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you got for me? I'm stoked to be back.
Let's talk about what happened in California last week with the ICE raids. And of course, you know, when it becomes the cannabis community that gets targeted here, it tends to get a little bit, I don't know, I always think of conspiracies. Did they pick this farm because they were growing cannabis, or did they pick it as a farm and that is producing produce? And or did it even matter, do you think?
You know, I think there's probably a lot of things going on here. I don't doubt that the reports of having minors being present or working on the farm played a big role in this, that's a problem no matter where you stand on this issue. I do think, I don't know if it was, I can't say, you know, whether or not it was targeted specifically because it is a cannabis farm. I will say that a large number of undocumented folks work on farms, period, in the United States. A very large number of the, you know, farm labor force in the United States is made up of undocumented workers. So if there is a political intention to target California and then target farms, that's obviously a pretty easy way to go. That being said, Trump did say like a couple of months, like in the last few months, that he wouldn't be targeting farms after the farm lobby freaked out when he started doing ICE raids on certain farms. And so I think maybe politically, yes, cannabis is kind of that more moral gray area where they can say where they can target farm workers with a federal mandate because cannabis is legal, as is aiding and, you know, employing, you know, people without proper work authorization. So and obviously employing children as well. So there's a lot of things going on here. I think cannabis definitely made it a hell of a lot easier. And I do think it provides a way for Trump to make an example of farm workers without targeting more traditional agricultural products like, you know, obviously food. To give you an example. So it's hard to say for sure what is going on. It does set a terrible precedent. It does open up. I mean, cannabis farms have always been opened up to this, but this all blows right through the Cole memo and variety of other federal accords and does it makes me nervous. I think it should make everyone nervous that it now sets a precedent and maybe a mandate for raiding cannabis farms. But to be clear, cannabis is federally illegal, so technically this was always possible. I will admit, though, that after the raids, which happened on July 10th, I did think to myself over that following weekend, I remember thinking distinctly, like, oh, they're never going to legalize this. I do think that throughout history, cannabis prohibition has been used by the government at all levels to target Black and Brown people and other marginalized communities. It's a very easy way in. If you keep it illegal, that's a very easy way to engage with them and get them into the justice system. So my takeaway from what happened very personally is that, why would they legalize it if they can have this as legal cover for targeting so many other, initiatives politically? So that's just a very long-winded way of saying I don't know, but those are the nuances that are present there.
The entirety of that interview will be released later on our distribution network. Next up, some movement in Pennsylvania's legislature towards starting an adult use legal market in that state that already has a vibrant medical program. Now, a bipartisan bill is being debated before being presented to their governor, Josh Shapiro, who is poised to sign it. One state that has slowly moved towards a medical program is the state of Nebraska. That state has now issued an adult use and medical cannabis license to the Omaha tribe in that state. And Tina Tasaka has that story and the Nevada report next.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Cannabis Compliance Board, CCB, has released new statistics for July, and here's the breakdown of licensed establishments for Nevada. The total active operational licenses statewide is 378. Here's the breakdown. Cultivation facilities, 119. Production facilities, 95. Independent testing laboratories, 8. Consumption lounge facilities, 2. Retail cannabis stores, dispensaries, 106. Medical cannabis dispensaries, 1. And distributors, 47. And more in Nevada. This week, the Champs Trade Show, the largest counterculture event in the U.S., returns to the Las Vegas Convention Center South Hall, July 23rd through July 26th. Hours are 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. New this year, Champs is debuting a dedicated mycology exhibit space showcasing mushroom-related products, cultivation tools, and innovations in the growing psychedelic and wellness markets. Learn more and register at champshow.com. Will Snoop be there? The Omaha tribe of Nebraska became the first government in the state to fully legalize and regulate both medical and recreational cannabis effective July 15th. The unanimous tribal council enacted the new Title 51 Cannabis Control Code, which establishes licensing, testing, advertising, enforcement, seed-to-sale tracking, and a tribal cannabis regulatory commission. The Omaha tribe is not waiting on broken systems to deliver. Omaha Tribe of Nebraska Attorney General John Cartier said in a statement, "We are asserting our sovereign right to govern, protect our community, and build a sustainable economy that reflects our values. Adults 21 and over can possess up to 1 ounce on tribal lands, and non-tribal visitors can purchase cannabis as well. The new law includes expungement of past cannabis offenses and a strong social equity program for patients, elders, veterans, and underserved groups. Revenue from cannabis taxes will fund health, education, housing, and more. Tribal leaders call the move a stand for sovereignty, economic growth, and community well-being." That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
I'm Jennifer Boozer for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Here in Alabama, I'm reporting from Newmarket at the Farm Expo hosted by the Agricultural Commissioner candidate Dr. Deidre Willis. Dr. Deidre believes that hemp regulation should all be done through the agricultural department, given that it is an agricultural commodity. Right now, the state of Alabama has passed and now enacted HB 445. My business, Cannabama, and many other stores across the state of Alabama have now closed or are about to close. Our revenue has gone down to 10% or less, and no business can survive in these conditions. There is devastation around the state of Alabama, and we're continuing to receive calls every day, even 3 weeks in, from customers who want to know what can they do. The hemp industry has provided the only access to plant medicine in the state of Alabama for the last 7 years. And now, businesses are shuttering in every city and every municipality across the state. We're here today to support candidates who are pro-cannabis and pro-hemp in the state of Alabama. State Senate candidate Manny Ledkins from District 14, along with Dr. Deidre and others, we're here to speak about how important agriculture is to the state of Alabama. We are, in fact, a farming state, and how things like cannabis and hemp should be under the purview of the agricultural department, given that it comes from the ground. Also in the state, we've had our first arrest for possession. A woman in Limestone County was arrested, pulled over, and she was found to have 7 hemp pre-rolls and a THCA vape. We have no more information, but she was arrested on multiple charges. And now in the state of Alabama, possession of a hemp joint carries a Class C felony, up to 10 years in prison, while possession of fentanyl is a Class D, and illegal weed possession is only a misdemeanor. Stay tuned to Sweet Home Cannabama every week on FM Talk 106.5 and right here on YouTube under the Sweet Home Cannabama page, where we're going to keep you updated on everything happening in cannabis in Alabama for the last 6 years, and we're going to keep it going as long as we can. For Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Jennifer Bruiser.
That'll do it for the A block or first section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News show. We have more coming up next, including our block of international reports from Europe to Canada. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this break.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.